Hello and welcome to the Wednesday Total Soccer Show. I am Daryl Grove and I'm joined by a man who always fights for his place. It's Taylor Rockwell. No one's knocking you off this podcast.
No, man. I mean, if anybody wants to come here, talk better than me, talk faster than me, make weird analogies better than me, then they're more than welcome. But until they can, I'm going to be here.
You have like 500 appearances or something like that?
Something like that, yeah. Not many in the Champions League, but many appearances overall.
We'll be talking about Dallas's 3-1 defeat away to Pachuca, which knocked them out of the CONCACAF Champions League. But we are, of course, obliquely referencing Jermaine Jones' appearance on ESPNFC, talking to Herculez Gomez and Max Bretos. He came out swinging.
He did.
Defending himself as well?
Yeah, it felt a little bit, I think you pointed out that they begin with asking him about the Galaxy, about MLS, and it did feel...
That was easing him in, right?
It felt like that, but it also felt like he was sort of like, guys, come on. You know why I'm here. Like, let's get to these conversations we need to have about the U.S. national team.
And if you've not been following, I think this is all about, after the game against Panama, Matt Doyle, who we're a big admirer of for MLSsoccer.com, wrote a piece that was suggesting, making the case for a U.S. midfield without Jermaine Jones. Jermaine Jones responded on Twitter. He was not impressed that essentially a segment of the company he works for, Major League Soccer, was suggesting he should no longer play for the US. But Matt Doyle's piece does represent sort of a feeling among the US fan base that maybe it's time to move on from Jermaine Jones.
And I think he makes a very credible argument that he points out that Jermaine Jones has done
This is Matt Doyle.
Yes, he's done very good things for the US national team, he being Jermaine Jones. He scored goals in the World Cup. He's played amazing in qualifying. Even at club level with Colorado. But I think Doyle's point was that some of that really good stuff he's done is kind of to the detriment of the U.S. national team. That's him being out of position. It's him trying to play hero ball, win those big balls, make big things happen. That can be good, but it can leave people kind of hung out to dry.
Yeah, and the other part of Matt Doyle's piece, not to recap the whole thing, but essentially Jermaine Jones is slightly on the downslope physically, right? Even though, I would say he's a very fit player for 35, but he's also not quite as fast as he was, and there are things that he tries to get to that he doesn't get to that in his head he's getting to, right? But then there's also the idea that there are up-and-coming players who could replace him at this point. Like Matt Doyle mentions guys like Kellen Acosta, for example, who does replace Jones in the final 15 minutes of that Panama game.
Yeah, and he also points out that it seems more likely that the U.S. is going to move into sort of like a 4-1-3-2 style formation. Which, again, it's about maybe that that midfield duo of Bradley Jones isn't quite as necessary anymore if you're starting to bring in different players to provide different roles. All that is to say, I don't really want to debate or discuss the Doyle article in too much detail, other than to say I thought it was very well written. I thought it was very intelligently written, and it made a very compelling argument.
I thought it was also very respectful of Jermaine Jones' talents, and maybe it's the headline Jermaine Jones was not happy with. And the thing that that the headline points to is the thing that Jones addresses in the interview with Gomez and Bretos, is that he doesn't feel like he gets enough respect. I think one of the phrases was like, the other guys, they are legends, but I'm not a legend.
And I know nothing about this article, about the editorial process at MLSsoccer.com. I can say that I have written pieces that had a very standard headline, and that headline was changed because you need a more inflammatory or kind of attention-grabbing headline. So there's even a chance that headline wasn't written by Matt Doyle. That it could have been like, Jermaine Jones has been an amazing servant for the U.S. national team, but maybe the future is different.
Any writer, freelance or staff, knows that you don't get choice on the headline. Your editor gets choice on the headline.
Yes, because I've then gotten attacked for why would you write such a bad headline? It's I didn't, but it's also my employer, and I don't want to criticize them. Oh boy, here we are. Anyway, so all that is to say that, I imagine Jermaine Jones saw that headline, didn't love it, took issue with it. Maybe read the article, maybe didn't, who knows. But I think maybe had pre-existing frustration that he spoke to on that ESPNFC podcast, and then maybe this brought it out more fully.
And I think it's a good way to phrase this is, it's not directly, the interview wasn't directly in response to just Matt Doyle's article. I feel like it's in response to a general feeling amongst the fan base and media that are suggesting maybe it's time to move on from Jermaine Jones. Here's my big question. I feel like most people will have heard this interview as well. Did Jermaine Jones convince you that he's, one, disrespected, and two, deserves to keep his place on the US national team? Because he really was like, nobody is better than me. Show me the person who's better than me, and I'll step aside. Nobody is better than me. I'm holding on to this place. I'm playing in the 2018 World Cup. Try and take it from me. I dare you.
First of all, as I've said many times on this show before, deserve got nothing to do with it. All right, so there's no.
What's that from?
I cannot remember. I was trying to remember before I quoted it. I always want to say it's The Wire, but I don't think it's The Wire. Okay. I think it's something else. But it's more. I think yes, he did convince me of the idea that he probably is disrespected a little bit. That he probably doesn't get the credit he deserves.
Same here. Same
because I think if you go back to say the 2014 World Cup, the iconic moments I would say are John Brooks reacting to that header against Ghana and that goal against Jermaine Jones, and just how like electrifying and amazing Portugal. It was. Yeah, that I think even Ian Darke like kind of couldn't believe that what had just happened.
Yeah,
I can tell.
I remember it's like kind of from distance, and he bends it into the far corner.
It's 25 out. It's hit on a half volley, and I can remember the sound it makes when it hits the net, because it is like a whip. That is how hard he hits that ball. And so I think it's easy to remember those big moments, but I remember other stuff. I remember moments in the 2011 Gold Cup when I saw him play in person, and remembering like, oh wow, that was an amazing run. Oh wow, everybody came over to celebrate as a team with him. Like that was clearly a moment where they were trying to like make him feel like part of the team.
And there's the thing I remember as well is Jurgen Klinsmann saying that Jermaine Jones kind of sets the tempo for nastiness. You know, he held him as the example of a player that like gets nasty and is willing to really fight for the team. And I still believe that that's true. I think he's one of those players that ups the tempo when he's on the field, and he sort of leads by example in that way of not just raw effort, but like really concentrated. I am the same way he's holding on to his starting spot and arguing for it. He does the same thing for the ball and often gets it that way. Yeah. And I think having a player like that on the team is really, really, really important. And I think when it's not there, you might miss it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think so. And I think it's also it's easy to miss, like because of the way the U.S. national team is nowadays. It's easy to not remember how big it was when he decided he was going to play for the U.S. national team. I remember like he was out for a year, I think it was,
right?
And I still had him
get him and then lose him to injury for a bit. And we're waiting for him to come back.
He wasn't eligible yet. I think it was still he was waiting for the clearance to go through and to get his passport. But I remember like on the off chance that he did get cleared when I was writing for like the Offside World Cup blog in 2010, that he was still in my like top 50 players, even though he had never played for the U.S. national team and wouldn't make it. Yeah. But it did have this feel of like, oh, we're bringing in a ringer. Like this is going to be amazing. And I mean, and he showed that from the outset that he was a very good player, a very strong player. He had ups and downs, as any player will, but I remember how big of a deal it was when he came in. And I think nowadays, because it's much more common for dual national players to come in, and I think they have started doing so at a younger age, where the U.S. is getting them to commit, so it doesn't feel like here's this guy who's played, as he said, 30 Champions League games, he's played in the
15
Bundesliga.
Years in Europe.
Yeah, and so to have him suddenly
not 10,
playing,
not 5, not 1, 15.
Exactly.
He was very, very firm on that.
He really was. It's like I feel like he had like a fact sheet in front of him just so he knew for sure. But like to have that
he
suddenly,
Jermaine Jones best stats.
Yes, and to have those stats suddenly in that national team, it was a very big deal and a very exciting deal. So I do want to say, with all that in mind, that it does feel like maybe it's easy to forget about a lot of what he's done for the program and within the program. Yeah. But it's also worth noting that, I mean, I remember even when he first started playing for the national team, there were jokes about yellow cards. There were jokes about red cards. Yep. We would make bets on what minute he would get his first yellow card for the national team.
I think, part of the problem, I think, when you watch a Jermaine Jones game, if you pay very, very close attention, it's kind of like Michael Bradley. You'll see a lot of the smaller, smarter things that he does, right? But if you're just kind of watching in the bar and just paying attention to the big moments, the things you're going to see are sort of overly optimistic hero passes that get cut out, and you're going to see fouls. Yeah. Right? And you're going to remember those, and then you think of him as super reckless and super wasteful in possession. And that is kind of a truth, but it's also not the whole truth. Yeah. And that's fair. Like, you can exaggerate those moments in your head, and you think, why would we play this guy? All he ever does is give the ball away with optimistic balls and foul people. But that's not the whole truth.
No, not at all. And I think
it's part of the truth.
And I think that's the truth. Yeah. I think it's more so it's representative of current sports debate. That it's either he's the best or he's the worst. He's either on the team or he's off the team. It's got to be one or the other. And I don't think that maybe was fair in times past. I'm not even sure if it's fair now.
Is that part of what he's reacting to as well?
What?
That people are either like, he's great when he scores in the World Cup, but now he's like not playing so well. We want him off the team.
Well, that's what I found so confusing, is that he kind of routinely went to this idea of like, if there's somebody better than me, if there's somebody playing better than me, and then he definitely at first just said if there's somebody better than me. Then he made a little more specific with like, if they're playing week in and week out against top tier opposition and they're performing better than I am and they're beating me in practice, then sure, I'll step away. Like he made it very clear there. But I think And he also added, like, if I have a bad game, if I play poorly, then of course you can criticize me, but don't say that I'm bad. Don't say that I should be. And so it feels like he's
that's fair.
But it feels like he's blending those two things, and then it becomes I scored in the 2014 World Cup. Nobody else scored the way I did. I was the best player on the field. Nobody else played as good as I did. So why are you saying I should be dropped now, 3 years later? It's like because it's 3 years later.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
It's 3 years later.
And
it's
you can't combine those things.
And also all those Champions League games for Schalke, those are kind of in the past now, right? He hasn't played in the UEFA Champions League recently,
right?
I think he's maybe played a couple of games in the CONCACAF Champions League.
You know what I'm saying? And that's where I go back to that quote of like deserve's got nothing to do with it. It's not like I did these things in the past and I did these things, so I deserve to continue to be in this team.
Yeah,
I would say
we put Claudio Reyna back in the team.
And actually, it's funny you say Claudio, because the one that really keeps springing to my mind lately is Claudio Ranieri. That people were so like, no, you stay with him. How can you get rid of him? He won you the Premier League, and so many people.
Now Leicester City at 10th,
and so many people that I wanted to talk to you about this the other day, actually. But so many people said, like, in the same breath, like, you don't fire Claudio Ranieri because of what he did. Yeah, they're probably going to get relegated, and it was just sort of like that's what's going to happen. But he won you the title. You get rid of him because they weren't performing well, and suddenly they've won 5 games in a row. They're the only team to lose 5 and then win 5 in Premier League history.
And now they're not. And now they're not in the relegation zone at all.
And so
even
like,
close.
you might have done these amazing things, but there does come a point where you have to question the on-field performances. And it seems like he maybe doesn't feel like that is fair. And maybe he feels like, I've had a bad game, but one bad game shouldn't lead so many people to say I should be dropped from the team. And that's where I think the disagreement is that I would say it hasn't just been one bad game, and he feels like it is.
It's also a series of injuries, you know what I mean? And he hasn't been playing as much as you would like him to, right? There's a lot of that going on as well. Okay, I've got another question for you, though.
Sure.
Why are we talking about this? Why does this feel like a big deal? I'm not saying we shouldn't be talking about it, because it does feel like a big deal to me when I heard this interview, when I heard about this interview. But this feels rare to me. So what's the weird moment we're in here?
I think because in my opinion, I could be totally wrong, but this is my perspective on it, is that it feels like historically the U.S. locker room has been very closed. It's been a very tight-knit group, to the extent that it took 10 years to figure out why John Harkes was dropped as captain.
Right, and that stuff was secret. That would have been all over Twitter the same day if that was happening these days.
But even then, there have been little feuds here and there, like not even feuds, but just little comments. There was like the Tim Howard, we need to focus on the domestic game, and maybe and maybe blown out of proportion, maybe not blown out of proportion, depending on perspective. There was a little bit of a Twitter feud between Bedoya and Altidore, but I think overall the U.S. program or the coaches or whomever do a very good job of keeping things in-house.
Yes.
To the extent that only after Klinsmann left did we start to hear those stories about maybe there being cliques in the locker room and maybe there were like divisions within it.
The Brian Strauss Sporting Life, Sporting News? I can't remember what it's called, I'm sorry. But that article from March 2013, notwithstanding, that was the one weird, it's like someone flung the door open and we quickly all looked in to see what was going on, and someone slammed it shut quickly afterwards, and then we beat Costa Rica and drew with Mexico, and everyone was like, oh, it's fine, forget it, we're all good.
But even, and I could be wrong, but I feel like even that article, it was a lot of like unnamed sources within the locker room.
All the players spoke off record.
So it's very, very
not off
rare.
Record, sorry, unnamed, like you said.
It's very rare, in my opinion, to then have this one big player come out and say, like, no, this guy's wrong, no, this guy's wrong, I'm going to defend my spot, I'm going to go on this talk show. I think at one point he said he was going to do a live Instagram session where he was going to clarify everything. I don't know if that ever happened.
I think that's what led to this. I think this became this instead because it's a bigger platform for him.
Yeah, probably. And maybe it's
maybe
a little
he doesn't
bit...
have our number?
Yeah, probably not. It's also probably... From a publicity standpoint, I'm assuming he has a publicist, and I'm assuming they pointed out that maybe it's better to have somebody structuring it and asking questions rather than him just ranting for 40 minutes.
Because Facebook Live, then you're getting questions from fans on Facebook.
Well, I think it was Instagram. I think he's doing one of those like Instagram live feed session things. I don't know how it works. I don't know. Technology is confusing. Anyway, so I think that's what makes it kind of a talking point, is suddenly to have this player come under criticism, come under fire, and then fight that fire very aggressively and publicly. It's a rare thing for the U.S. team.
Can I propose to you that it's kind of weirdly a step forward in terms of the profile of the U.S. national team, that players fighting for their spot in the starting 11 is now becomes a story in a big way when they come out talking about it?
Yeah.
I think it kind of means that soccer is more in the culture.
Yeah, I think that's part of it.
I'm not necessarily saying it's a positive part of the culture, but at least it definitely makes it more interesting and more dramatic and a little more soap opera-y.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. But I also think a huge element here, and it's not something that we've talked about, I think I've just had this realization as we've been discussing it, is that I think we don't really know Jermaine Jones at all. I would say most every other player on the national team, you know a little bit about. Now, that's either through interview or it's through like a constructed element. Like, I mean, Landon Donovan obviously not playing anymore, but do you remember those commercials he did with Steve Nash? So you get this idea of like, oh, okay, he's a little bit sardonic, he's a little bit sarcastic.
Yeah. Or even the Wells Fargo one, and there was the crossing the border Mexico one. Do you remember? There's a gambling ad, I think.
Yeah. But like Tim Howard, he's done interviews where like he took you up to his like man cave room where he's got all his metal posters, and so you start to learn little things about each player. I feel like we really don't know very much about Jermaine Jones. And I think early on that was because he didn't speak very good English, or at least didn't want to speak English with the press. So he would avoid interviews. And I think like to the extent that now I can say he's got a bunch of tattoos. I know from very recent profiles that he is now very spiritual and like very dedicated to his family. But that's a recent development. And I think outside of those little bits and pieces, he's not been one that I think we focused on a lot. And I think maybe that's because people don't understand him or know how to approach him. But I also think that feeds into this idea of there are profiles on Tim Howard, there are profiles on Clint Dempsey. Why aren't there profiles on this guy who scores big goals?
Because wasn't one of the things he said that like he's German American and not full American? That's his quote from that interview, and that maybe that's one of the reasons that, for example, he was asked about the Bradley Jones central midfield partnership, which is really what this is all about, right? And his idea was, well, if the team doesn't play well, how come it's Jermaine Jones we have to replace and not the other guy? And he was kind of careful about how he phrased it, but I want to say not quite careful enough to not make it clear that he's saying, hey, we should also look at Bradley and not just Jermaine.
And I think it's also worth noting that that's taken within the context of the question being, what do you say to people say?
And Hercules Gomez pushed that as well, right? He made sure to like nail him down and make sure you talk about that question.
But Jones, I think, did a good job of moving away from that and into, if the team has a bad game, why is it always me who gets the focus? So I think even then he wasn't trying to say necessarily Michael Bradley sucks and I should be playing over him. I think it was sort of like, why is it always that if there's a bad performance, I am the first one who gets blamed? Which was interesting to me because I feel like a lot of people are very inclined to blame Michael Bradley just as much as they are Jermaine Jones and Josie Altidore as well. Those are the three who seem to get a lot of the criticism and attention.
I think that's just the higher profile players, they get the criticism, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, Clint Dempsey used to get it when he wasn't scoring, for example. Now he's scoring again, we're not talking about it.
I mean, again, didn't you find that, like, the story from 2009 that was about, like, 2009 World Cup qualifying about how Clint Dempsey needs to be dropped and we need to move on?
Here's what it is. Some enterprising fellow in mid-2009 snagged the Twitter handle. So this is early Twitter days, right? 2009. At USMNT. Right? That Twitter handle must be worth, it's gold, right? I'd love that Twitter handle right now. They have 9,000 followers and 3 tweets because they made 3 tweets and then just gave up on it. And I think people have just been accidentally following it, thinking it might be the official US soccer feed, right? One of their tweets from 2009 was, we need to move on from Dempsey, Beasley, and Connor Casey.
Okay.
And 2 of those guys still play for the US national team. And when I found it, Clint Dempsey had just scored a hat-trick against Honduras.
So there's that. But so I think it's a weird interlocking series of issues or just series of concerns. That like I can see where he's coming from, but I disagree. But then I kind of disagree with my disagreement, but then I also still don't. So it's a very like nuanced situation.
Well, before we move on, didn't we already come down on the answer when we did our recent show about we touched on Jermaine Jones after the Panama game, which was essentially I would like him to be part of the US national team roster. I don't think he always needs to start, but there would definitely be roles for him as a mentor to younger players, as a tone setter. But like if there's a game, for example, when it's all about positional discipline and not a guy who's going to go like doing his Jermaine Jones hero thing, then maybe that's not a game for him, or maybe that's a game where you bring him in for the last 20 minutes if we're desperate. Like I think he's a really good off the bench sort of shake up the game kind of player. Because that is what he does, for better or worse, and maybe that's the thing you do when you're trailing.
It speaks volumes that like that's I absolutely agree with that. That's not even what I meant though. I meant it's a nuanced issue when it comes to like, is it that he's German American? Does he get enough love? Does he not? Like, is he getting too much love? Well, whatever. Like, it's just all those little issues that I felt very strongly about the first time I listened to that interview.
We love Fabian Johnson plenty, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, but again, I would say like we don't think of him as like this like amazing American player who we love and adore. Again, I would say if you look at the people who I would say we said this off air, but look at the jerseys. I'm guessing most U.S. jerseys are probably Howard. If you're going goalkeeper, I'd say Dempsey, definitely. I bet there's still a bunch of Donovans. I bet there's Bradleys and Altidores. I bet Fabian Johnson.
I have an Altidore.
I bet Fabian Johnson, Jermaine Jones, Timmy Chandler, probably slightly less popular.
Now,
there are different reasons for that again, but if you want to go down that route, it speaks to maybe because they're playing abroad, or maybe because they were like less known from a media standpoint, and then from a fan standpoint, they're not going to be as attractive when it comes to that. So then if you're Jermaine Jones signing autographs at the end of the game and you're constantly signing Bradley Altidore jerseys, you're going to be like, hey, man, come on now. Wait a minute.
You could just like cross out Bradley Dempsey Altidore's name and write Jermaine Jr.
I think so.
At Jermaine Jr.
At Jermaine Jr. He definitely writes the Twitter handle.
Okay. I guess we would kind of recommend to listen to that interview if you want to hear Jermaine Jones sort of in his own words how he feels about this whole situation.
And Max Bretos do some screaming.
He does do a bit of screaming. I feel like he was ready for vacation maybe a day too early.
Yes.
Yeah. Right, before we move on, today's show, Taylor, is sponsored by the fine and wonderful people at Roughneck Scarves.
That's right, Daryl Grove. Roughneck Scarves, the official scarf provider of U.S. Soccer, USL, MLS, and the NCAA.
Yes, they are. And also the Total Soccer Show.
Well, there's that too, yeah.
You could buy a Total Soccer Show scarf from Roughneck Scarves.
Slightly closer to home, that one.
They also do custom scarves. You can design any scarf you want, and Roughneck Scarves will make a batch of those scarves just for you.
Yes.
So we put it out on Twitter. If we were going to design a scarf for Jermaine Jones to cheer him up, like wrap him up in something warm, cheer him up maybe, what would the custom design scarf for Jermaine Jones look like? And the answers are, Taylor.
We've actually had two more since we printed this one out, so I'll read those first. We had Nathan Seal wrote, it would say, the second best Jones in American soccer history, # Team Kobe. And also
would that cheer Jermaine Jones up?
Probably not. Clayton Diaz wrote, one side on the pitch, other side suspended or injured, and tassels on each end to look like dreadlocks.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Oh, that's a good touch. That's a good touch. Yeah,
I like that one.
All right, we got some other ones from Patrick Keeler says, run on one side and kick on the other, both with exclamation marks, with a big American eagle.
That works.
I mean, Jermaine Jones does run and kick.
Yep. I think we've really tapped into the idea, or our listeners have, or our Twitter followers have, the idea of like maybe using text to explain the duality of Jones. Because Mike Byte says, after reading his quotes again from that interview, it should be kick him out on the opposite side of best player on the field. You raise each side accordingly.
So if you're Jermaine Jones having a good game, you hold up the best player on the field side. When it's going badly, you raise up, kick him out. All right. I mean, that kind of represents fans' approach to Jermaine Jones, right? Justin Miller says it should have designs from his actual tattoos and literally be on fire.
That seems risky.
I'm not sure Roughneck Scars would approve the second part.
Probably
but
not.
designs from his tattoos is an interesting idea.
That's a pretty good one. Yeah. Ryan Altenbach says, just a picture of a red, white, and blue bulldozer.
Yes, that represents the very best of Jermaine Jones. That's it. Yeah, off the bench 20 minutes, bulldoze the opposition.
And we probably should have ended with that one rather than Anthony Gruzdis's, which was just checkered, yellow, and red cards.
Oh, I think you've done these in reverse chronological order, right? Because wasn't that the first one that came through?
I have.
Checkered, yellow, and red cards, which represents maybe the downside and what other people see about Jermaine Jones.
Lots of different options there for Jermaine and the people at Roughneck Scarves to choose from. And if you wanted to design your own Jermaine Jones scarf, if you just want to order one that they have in stock, you can do so, and you can use the Total Soccer Show promo code, Total Soccer Show, all one word, to get 20% off any scarf in the shop.
And any big custom order as
also
well. Yeah. Thank you to Roughneck Scarves for sponsoring today's episode. The link is in the show notes.
That it is, my friend. That it is. Shall we move on, speaking of MLS, to a sad story from an MLS team?
So we set the DVR last night for Pachuca versus FC Dallas in the CONCACAF Champions League semi-final second leg.
Yep.
The score was 3-1 to Pachuca at the end of 90 minutes, so Dallas are out.
At the end of 92 minutes, very important to get that in there.
90 minutes, it was 3-3. It was all looking good. A late goal from Chucky Lozano made it 3-1 on the night.
Well, did he play?
Pachuca.
I didn't know.
He was mentioned by the commentators.
Oh, was he?
Several times on Univision Deportes. I've got to say, Taylor, I'm taking this extra hard because do you remember one of my 2017 predictions?
No.
That Dallas and New York Red Bulls would play in the CONCACAF Champions League final. It was a super optimistic prediction.
It was.
New York Red Bulls felt early, not good performances early on, I think against a Canadian team. But Dallas, I thought, might do it for me and go all the way, especially after that 2-1 win at home against Pachuca.
Well, we still have Vancouver as of recording time.
Although they are 2-0 down already, right?
Yes.
From first leg.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's maybe talk about Dallas's before we get into the goals. Let's talk about Dallas's approach to this game, because we spotted it pretty early, right?
Yep.
They were thinking, all right, 2-1 lead, we're away, we're at Pachuca, Omar Gonzalez defending for them. Maybe we're gonna sit off a little bit.
I think so, because I think with that 2-1 lead, you can sit back a little bit, you can contain, you can step when you need to. But if you start to frustrate, Pachuca are the ones who have to make something happen.
Yeah.
They're at home to a nervous crowd, and if they don't start making things happen quickly, they'll start to get antsy, they'll start to get nervous, they'll start to over-pursue and over-commit, and then you can maybe catch them on a break. FC Dallas had those opportunities, didn't quite execute them early, and then were made to pay for it.
The one that really comes to mind, I wrote down 22nd minute, is when Omar Gonzalez himself has stepped out of the back for Pachuca. He tries to play a ball into, I think, Yara, into the striker. Zimmerman steps, as Zimmerman did many times. Walker Zimmerman stepped many times, won the ball, gave it to Acosta, who I think he went through Lamar maybe, ends up setting Coleman through on a break. Coleman can't beat the keeper, but it was like almost a perfect counter-attack. And I think that's exactly what FC Dallas were going for.
I think so, and I think they did, I would argue, a decent job, at least in that first 30 to 40 minutes of, well, not 40, maybe 30 to 35 minutes of basically keeping those two banks of four in a 4-4-2. They had their forwards apply intermittent pressure as Pachuca brought the ball over to midfield and past midfield. That's when that pressure would come in. And you had a very good, it seems like hard fought, organized. Basically, what I'm saying is they did a lot of drills, did FC Dallas. That it was Acosta would sit back, but then he would step, and as soon as he would step, Goretzka would come across, a center back would step up. Yeah. They knew when to cover and when to drop off and how to kind of keep their formation such that they could apply pressure, but not allow anybody to be wide open.
And I would say, to Acosta's credit, mostly in the first half, he did a good job of stepping when he needed to, but then also making the decision to back off and get back in that 4-4-2 shape and essentially stop Pachuca coming down the middle, right? And I'm thinking of if Jermaine Jones was playing for Dallas, he might have gone chasing. Right? That's one of the Jones v. Acosta sort of pros and cons.
Yeah. And so I think, and that's why I say they did a very good job right up until about the 38th minute. And to be fair, Pachuca did have opportunities before this, but there were a lot of either kind of half chances from inside the box, but still with the defender on them under tight control, or it was balls in that maybe Pachuca got ahead to, but either couldn't turn on target or put
Dallas,
just over.
Yeah, Dallas mostly made Pachuca play from out wide. Right? They never let them go through the middle, which I think is part of what they were doing with having the two banks of four.
But I think a key point that you made in watching this game was that when they would force them wide, they would force them wide because that's where they wanted balls into the box. I think they trusted their center backs to win it as much as they could. They lost a few of those battles, but generally speaking, they were okay. But the point was that you forced them wide, and you still put them under pressure as much as you can. So you're not just sending them wide and being cross it in, we're waiting. You're still at least making them have to take an extra touch to not just be able to pick their head up, find their spot, and then play that ball in. They've got to kind of shield the ball off and then pass it under duress.
Oh, so the first goal, is this when Lamar and Barrios had switched sides?
Yep.
Yeah, so this is where it all goes wrong, right? So if you haven't seen this game, Dallas are in a 4-4-2. The wide midfielders are Lamar on the left, Barrios on the right, and they're doing a good job of breaking when they break, because they're both attacking wingers, right? But also, joining their fullbacks, Grana and Figueroa, right and left, in going out there and just closing down and making sure Pachuca don't have an easy cross.
Right.
What happens is, this is all from memory, Taylor, so correct me if I'm wrong. Pachuca have a corner, and your corner, your positioning all goes off, right? Because everybody's in the box. Dallas break, and it ends up Barrios being on the left instead of the usual right. He breaks down the left. Lamar has to then go on the right. Then they start kind of crossing back over when Pachuca get the ball, so that you don't have your wide guys out wide, because they're sort of halfway through tracking back across to get back in position.
It's more like Barrios tries to break and loses the ball and then takes his time getting back.
I see.
So then now you've kind of got people trying to fill in where they can, but it's a little more makeshift than I think Dallas would have liked.
So ideally, Barrios should have stayed on the left and just tracked back immediately and not let, I think it's Ureta, the number 10 for Pachuca, have space to cross.
And so it ends up being a 3v2 situation out wide, and that's what I was talking about with you don't want that scenario, because then I think the Dallas players, they don't want to overcommit and they don't want to both swarm and then be beaten, and then it's a very easy cross in, so they both stand off a little bit more than I'm guessing they probably would have liked, and that's what allows Ureta to pick his head up and find a relatively unmarked Yara coming into the box.
Okay, so I think it's really hard to always try to blame one player for a goal.
But we're about to.
But Walker Zimmerman is not to blame, even though it looks like he's the one marking Yara. Because if you watch this goal, immediately after Yara heads it past Zeitz, Zimmerman turns and yells at Grana.
Right.
Correctly.
And this is definitely one of those situations, we've talked about it many times, when frequently the last person in the shot, when the goal happens, you almost always want to blame that person, and they're almost always not to blame. Because they're the one who's seen what's happening and tried to react to it. And in this situation, it's essentially Grana is supposed to be tracking Yara. Yara starts his run on the left-hand side, that ball coming in from the right. You can see Grana look and see Yara running, and then you see Grana do nothing. looks back across the field, watches that ball, doesn't warn Zimmerman, and I think very importantly as well, doesn't warn Seitz, the goalkeeper. Yep. So no one knows that Yara is coming in, and when that ball is delivered, it looks like, oh, it's a mishit cross. Seitz comes off his line. I think he thinks he's going to get to it. Zimmerman thinks, oh, no big deal. Then both of them realize, oh, wait, there's this other attacker here.
And nobody told me about him.
Right, and so that's why you see Seitz almost kind of back up out of nowhere and just try to make himself big because he realizes he's not going to win it. Zimmerman tries to body Yara off the ball because he now doesn't have positioning to win that ball, but he's not going to be able to do it. That's why ball goes in the back of the net. Yara runs off to celebrate. Zimmerman turns and yells.
Correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Correctly.
Yes.
Okay, so this is almost half-time though, right? It's a terrible time to concede. I will credit Pachuca with, you mentioned earlier that, it's kind of a pressure situation for them. They're 2-1 down. They need to score. I thought they did a good job of taking their time, making it happen. Mm-hmm. Once they have the one goal, they now lead on away goals because they have that goal in Dallas. Mm-hmm. I think in the second half, Dallas they started pushing the fullbacks a little higher, right? Grana and Figueroa getting up a little more. You can see Dallas working some attacks. But then, in the 80th minute, they haven't made the breakthrough, and Chucky Lozano strikes.
I still don't know why he's called Chucky or Chucky, but I'm assuming he's named
after Lozano.
Yes, Irving Lozano. I'm guessing he's named after the Chucky doll. That's all I can figure.
And if you have never heard of him before, we had a tweet saying, as excited as Americans are about Christian Pulisic, that's how excited Mexican fans are about Lozano. Mm-hmm. This is a guy who plays for Pachuca, plays for the Mexican national team, almost a guaranteed starter. I think he's definitely competing for a spot every time. This is a guy who is moving to Europe at some point. And
he's already been linked with a couple of the big clubs in England.
Yeah, so he's a really aggressive, fast, dangerous winger with capable of cutting inside and shooting, as Dallas found out.
Well, see, I'm still stuck on the Chucky doll comparison here, and you've just gone with aggressive, dangerous, fast, capable of cutting. Those all sound like the Chucky doll. And I would add, Chucky doll, it seems like can't be killed because they've made, I believe, 75 sequels. I mean, Lozano was on the ground a lot. He got kicked a lot. He got fouled a lot in this game. Got slapped in the face once or twice. Incidentally, but still. Slapped in the face is slap in the face. Still got up, kept running, still scored 2 goals. So maybe that's why. You can foul him all you want. He keeps coming.
So if you see this goal, you get a chance to see this goal. It's not the winning goal, right? It's the second goal. Lozano bursts between Lamar and Gruezzo, right?
Yep.
Bursts between Lamar and Gruezzo. I think neither of them quite think he's going to do it, so he just does it anyway. And then Grana doesn't step to him.
He does not.
Grana should step to him. Then Lozano hits this shot from you would call it from Zeitz's position, it's coming out from the top right corner. Somehow gets it inside the near post and does it so quickly that Seitz doesn't even dive fast enough to get down to it.
He does. The way he shoots, there's not a lot of wind up to it at all, and he doesn't really follow through. So it's this kind of punch. It's like a jab, basically.
Yeah.
It
stays low, right?
I would go even faster. I'd say rabbit punch, and that's apt because I think he hits it so quickly that we freeze framed it. Seitz doesn't start reacting until the ball is already past that first wave of defenders. So maybe it's that he saw, or his final wave of defenders rather. So maybe it's that he saw it late. But maybe it's also just the way it was hit. That Seitz, I think, is a little bit slow to react, can't get down fast enough, and that's why it beats him near post.
Yeah, I think so too.
But I think you're correct that maybe Seitz gets a little bit of the blame there, but I think it's also definitely the two who failed to close him down properly, let him step through.
Yeah.
And then it's Grana for
It really is, right? Because what I see happen is, he does burst past Lamar and Gruezzo, so they haven't done a proper job of closing the angles. I think they think Lozano's going to the outside, so they think, all right, we'll let him go outside, and he just bursts between them.
Yep.
But once he does that, you watch Grana back off.
Yep.
He backs away from him, almost like, I don't want to have to deal with this.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much exactly what it was. So again, it's Zimmerman who then is the one to step, and in the slow-mo replays, it's his foot that you see kind of outstretched trying to stop it.
So it looks like Zimmerman was beat, but he was really stepping across to try and do Grana's job for him.
Yeah, and really, we have no love towards. I mean, Zimmerman's fine; he's a good guy, whatever. I guess I don't know, but I have no particular love for him. It is just that on both of these replays, it's like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, wait, maybe not your fault.
Great stuff from Lozano.
Absolutely.
Great stuff from Lozano. Okay, and then Dallas makes some changes. Javier Morales, the 37-year-old Javier Morales, comes in to sort of add something to the attack. Tisho Akindele was already on. So Dallas really going for it.
And Kellen Acosta brought off, which I thought was interesting because I think we both kind of agreed that maybe not the strongest game from him. Some errant passes, some bad shooting.
I feel like defensively he was mostly good and very disciplined, but he had that one shot from top of the box that literally went out for a throw-in. He had a lot of crossfield balls that didn't quite make it.
Right.
So I think it was a reminder that Kellen Acosta still has room to grow.
Yep,
right?
Absolutely.
It still has room to try and dominate again. The other thing that was really noticeable, I'm sure FC Dallas fans will agree, in the absence of Mauro Diaz.
Yeah, it's almost like he was missing me a creative midfielder.
Yeah. Kellen Acosta, like Goretzka would sit deeper, number 7. Acosta would go a little bit more forward when they're in the attack. And he didn't do a great job of doing that thing where you need to sort of find space and connect play. I saw him like sitting in the spot where the number 10 would be, but not finding space to receive the ball, which was a good telltale sign of Mauro Diaz would have found a spot.
Right, and that's why I think in the second half you saw Dallas advance their fullbacks further forward up the field, because you've got to try to get numbers in there. You've got to try to draw some Pachuca players out and maybe create a little more space for the midfield.
Yeah.
That hadn't really worked, but that said, there's a goal in the 86th minute.
There is, but it's kind of random, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit.
So it's a Morales corner. It is punched out and down by Blanco, the Pachuca keeper. Goretzka then volleys it into the ground, which I'm sure wasn't deliberate.
I'm pretty sure not.
It bounces up, and then Christian Coleman does a really good job of just making the most of it, doing like a twisty-turny header. Like he twists in the air, puts the header into the far post.
And I know
suddenly
that
it's 3-3 on aggregate.
Yeah, and I know that we watched this game, like we saw the final few minutes of it, both of us did. We came back from soccer. This game was still happening, so we called it. But watching it today, we knew the result. We still watched it all the way through. And when I saw this goal go in, I feel like the FC Dallas players live already knew the result and knew that it was going to end 3-1, because the celebration,
wasn't it a big celebration,
I was so surprised. Like, you're scoring an away goal in a very difficult atmosphere, in a very important moment. Like, you would have expected the entire team to celebrate, and instead it was just sort of like, yeah, okay.
It's very subdued, right?
And it wasn't even like, okay, yeah, but we got to focus up and like make it happen again. It was very, it had all the familiar symptoms of a team who've scored when they're down 6-0. And it's like, yeah, okay, it's nice, but let's get back and try not to let them score anymore. It was very strange.
Maybe it's like tiredness. Maybe they really had... I mean, they did run hard, right? Keep trying to defend, and then be like, oh no, we've got to attack now because we're down. So maybe it's just a bit of that. But yeah, you'd think there would be some release and rush of emotion.
I feel like maybe they just forgot that aggregate score was important here. They're just like, oh, we lost, we're out.
So it was headed to, I believe, extra time.
Yep.
Until Chucky crosses.
Yep.
It's definitely a cross, right?
Definitely a cross.
Chucky crosses, aiming for Guzman, doesn't find him, but it bounces in beyond sight at the far post, and it's a goal for Chucky Lozano.
Right.
It's a horrible goal to concede in, the 90-something minute?
92nd.
Yep. They barely had time to kick off and have one attack, right? Oh, and it just feels like, it felt very like, I want to say CONCACAF, but not in that way that any like cheating or anything cynical has happened. Just like some horrible luck befalls an MLS team in Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Bad luck is a fair analysis of this?
No, because I think because there's no such thing as bad luck, I would say, when it comes to soccer. I mean, you can definitely have bad luck in terms of like breaking a leg or twisting an ankle. But again, to go back, maybe I've told this story before, but when I got my coaching license, one of like my marks that I got against me, or just comments, was that I tended to say like, oh, unlucky, when a kid was shooting. And the reality is, you're trying to say that because you're trying to tell the kid like, oh, it was bad luck, next time you'll do it. You just
shouldn't be nice to them.
But the reality is they've done something wrong. That's why they've missed the target. And so if you say unlucky, you're letting them off the hook. To say unlucky here is to let off a few people who probably could have done a better job.
Okay, where do you want to start?
I mean, we're not going to go with Yara this time, because I don't think necessarily it's his, or excuse me, not Yara. Grana, thank you. Yeah, not necessarily his fault this time. I'd say it's probably some combination of Morales and Lama.
Okay, not Figueroa? Because a lot of people would... I think Stu Holden tweeted that if Figueroa had stepped with the rest of the team, they would have caught Guzman offside.
We thought that too. We looked, not quite the case. Matt Hedges also... Figueroa is definitely like 5 yards behind most of the line.
Yeah.
But Hedges is at least a yard behind as well.
Yeah,
so even
or
if
at least
Figueroa,
level with Guzman, right? So he would have kept him on side.
Yes, exactly.
I would say Figueroa, instead of leaving this, could have like made a play on the ball and cleared it.
I think he
looked scared to touch the ball.
I think his fear in that moment, and I would say maybe he got a shout from somebody. Maybe it was Guzman, who knows? But I would guess in that moment his fear is like trying to chest it under duress. Maybe it accidentally hits his hand. Maybe he settles it down, and then Guzman comes through and just pokes it away.
Maybe bounces off in for an own goal. Okay.
And that's what I'm inclined. But it also might just have been that he realizes, because it actually doesn't touch him, and he doesn't really pull out
anyone.
He doesn't pull out that much. So I would also say maybe he just realizes, I can't really get to this, and I don't know what's going to happen, so I'm just going to avoid making contact.
And I think he's calculated. I mean, he's a wise old defender, right? I think, despite what he did for Honduras against the United States, I think maybe he's calculated as well that Guzman isn't getting to it. So like 99 times out of 100, that ball then just bounces out for a goal kick, right? And it's just his bad luck that it goes inside the post and is a goal. So then you've got to look at why Lozano had time and space to cross. And if I'm thinking of Morales in this situation...
And I believe it's because Morales is playing central. He's the one who replaced Kellen Acosta, but I think Lamar steps maybe, and then Morales has to fill the space, and so then Lamar comes central. Morales is out wide. I think he doesn't quite know if he's supposed to go help Grana, who is 1v1, so he kind of stays between Grana and Lozano, and I think because he's not quite sure who to commit to and where to mark, there's space there for Lozano to take a touch, pick his head up, play that ball in before anybody really steps to him and shuts down that angle.
And if there was one guy that you should close down, that you should have learned in the 80th minute, it's Lozano, right? Probably the best player on the field.
Yeah, I think
I'd
so.
say easily the best player on the field.
Man of the match. Yep.
Yeah. As there you go. So FC Dallas out of the CONCACAF Champions League at the semi-final stage. Is it time for the annual conversation about why MLS teams don't do better in the CONCACAF Champions League?
No, I don't think so. I do. But I know you have some thoughts on it. Do you want to wrap them up real fast?
Oh yeah. I said this off air to you. I'll say it on air. Yeah. I think MLS teams are getting better. MLS teams are getting deeper. MLS teams will do slightly better in the CONCACAF Champions League every year. So I don't think there's like a silver bullet. Unless we say we're going to give you an extra $3 million allocation money if you're in the CONCACAF Champions League. I think it's just slowly is that MLS teams will get better and will get closer and closer every year.
And you've got the format change next season.
Yes, so next season, no group stage, and there will be just a straight knockout starting in February of 16 teams, which in many ways isn't that different to what we already have, right, for MLS teams.
Right.
So it may have the same problem of pre-season, that where we have the knockout games in February and MLS teams aren't quite ready. The only thing I can say is we're not going to change the schedule, so MLS teams just need to get ready. Maybe all the teams that are in the CONCACAF Champions League should have some sort of pre-CONCACAF Champions League tournament that they all playing against each other.
Or they get sharp. Maybe now it's just MLS.
Put it the Get Sharp tournament.
You get, if you're playing in the CONCACAF, you get CONCACAF Champions League, you get, as usual American workers, you get 2 weeks of paid vacation and you're right back to it. Get ready for the start of that season. That's the way it works.
Use your 10 days wisely, people. Use your 10 days wisely.
Exactly.
Okay, final thing on today's show, Taylor. The Total Soccer Show Scouting Network. This is where people support Total Soccer Show. We assign you a promising young player to scout. Send us scouting reports. Let us know how they are doing.
Alrighty. Up first, we've got Wes Kaufman scouting Ayo Akinyola, the 17-year-old American forward for Toronto FC2.
I always forget that he's American. I keep thinking he's Canadian.
Yep. From a Will Parchman article on the best player in each MLS academy, quote, Akinyola is arguably the most exciting wide attacking player on a US U17 national team that also features Atlanta United's Andrew Carlton, if that tells you anything.
Whoa. Let's not say things we can't take back, Will Parchman.
Akinyola has also played with the Toronto USL team and has recently spent time with the US U17 residency. But he's still the most promising player in TFC's pipeline to not yet sign a contract. For TFC's sake, says Will Parchman, hopefully that changes soon.
All right. Thank you to Wes Kaufman for sending us that. Up next, Keith Kalmbach is scouting Federico Valverde. Suevi Valverde, one of my favourites. The 18-year-old Uruguayan midfielder for Real Madrid Castilla. That's basically their B team, right? Keith says, Suevi Valverde has missed the last 2 Castilla matches due to illness. They won one and lost one. Keith writes that he's not much of a conspiracy theorist. No, this says Taylor's fingerprints all over it. But Castilla have had 3 wins and 1 loss since his scouting journey began and are 2-0-0 with Suevi Valverde in the lineup, 1-0-1 without him. So basically, they can't lose if he's playing.
Exactly.
You're making everybody think in conspiracy terms.
I think conspiracy is the wrong term here. In as much as when I said it earlier, it's just more of like a theory. That's all. It's not conspiracy. It's just a theory. Jim Teed's up next scouting Carles Alenya, the 19-year-old Spanish midfielder for Barcelona.
Top tilde work there,
Thank
Taylor.
you. Thank you, my friend. Many expect that the graduate of La Masia will be the one to replace Andres Iniesta in a year or so, but for now we're focusing on immediate accomplishments. This past weekend he made his La Liga debut when he subbed on for the final few minutes of Barcelona's 4-1 victory over Granada and was very much involved in the final Barcelona goal.
All right, there's a name to remember then, Carlos Alenya, possibly the new Andres Iniesta.
Sure.
Up next, Russell Varner is scouting Hugo Ariano, the 19-year-old American defender for the LA Galaxy. Russell says Hugo has been called up to the U20 training camp, which started on April 3rd and runs through April 10th. The camp will help Tab Ramos pick out players for the upcoming U20 World Cup. Ariano is one of 5 players from the USL to make the squad. Isn't this squad meeting in England as well? So I feel like it's a big deal if you've been asked to travel over there.
Yeah, I suppose so. But it's also a lot of names that might not make it, and a lot of names that we're already familiar with not in that roster. So maybe it's trying to figure out maybe deepen the pool a little bit.
Oh, Taylor, the next one. I saw this email when it came in. I'm already sad, but I know you've got to read it.
Comes from Danielle Gaither, scouting DeSavio Payne, the 21-year-old American defender for FC Groningen. Groningen have confirmed that Payne's contract, which expires this summer, will not be renewed, indicating that he is unlikely to see much playing time in the Eredivisie. That is what they said as to why it won't be renewed.
So weren't we super excited when they sold their other right back? And we were like, all right,
2 right backs.
DeSavio's in. DeSavio's going to start the rest of the season for Groningen. And now his contract's not being renewed.
Well, Danielle adds that it doesn't help that he is once again injured and says it's unclear where DeSavio heads from here. Stars and Stripes FC have suggested that MLS or Bundesliga 2 could be possible destinations, but Danielle says that sounds more like a semi-educated guess than it does based on any inside info.
Okay, I would say anything from Stars and Stripes FC is at least 2/3 educated, yes.
There we go.
Mason Kritz is scouting Marco Farfan, the 18-year-old American defender for the Portland Timbers. Mason says that Farfan started in Portland's 1-1 draw with New England and was awarded with a spot on MLS Team of the Week for his performance. Farfan has also cemented his spot as the backup left-back for the Timbers. He already has 2 starts in 5 games, and if he hadn't gotten sick, would have already started 4 games this season instead. So I guess his Vitas is understood, right? Mason says, quote, "The future is bright. Get this kid into camp for the senior national team," end quote. Wow, he went big. And then adds, quote, "Okay, that might be extreme." Okay, thank you, Mason. Keeping it real.
Up next, Jillian Avalon scouting Jack Storer and Ronan Hale, 19 and 18-year-old forwards for Birmingham City.
The dynamic duo.
On Monday, the Birmingham U23s defeated the QPR U23s 3-1. Baby Jack and Baby Ronan were both brought in as subs and scored the difference-making goals. Baby Jack's was in the last 5 minutes, and Baby Ronan's was in the final minute. So well done to the Baby Blues.
How old do they have to get before Baby is
I have a feeling that it doesn't matter how old they are. They will stay Baby Jack and Baby Ronan forever. Because I'm pretty sure like Jonathan Spector, right? No, yeah, Jonathan Spector is still like Baby Jonathan. I'm pretty sure that's how it works.
All right, final scouting report today. Scott D. Friedman is scouting Emre Mor, the 19-year-old Turkish winger for Borussia Dortmund, and I might add, competition for Christian Pulisic. Scott says, Moore hasn't seen much playing time in the last 3 months, but this past weekend, manager Thomas Tuchel brought him on as an offensive sub late in the game. Shortly thereafter, Pulisic was brought on. Ousmane Dembele was already on the pitch, meaning that this was the first game in ages that all 3 teenagers were on the field at the same time. Sadly, neither Moore nor Pulisic made an impact on the game, which ended 1-1. Dortmund was lucky to get out with a draw as the ref missed 2 relatively clear penalty calls, one of which happened immediately before Dortmund broke on a counter-attack and scored their goal. I actually watched this game. I think this was Dortmund Schalke, I believe.
Yep. And one quick note on Emre Mor. I saw recently, and I'm not sure if this was taken out of context or if it was like mistranslation, but he was asked about where he sees his career going and was very specific with, I plan to play for Real Madrid, the best club in the world. That's where I want to go. And it prompted it prompted a lot of people to be like, hey, maybe you focus on getting first team opportunities at one of the best clubs in the world before you try to jump to another club where you won't.
And maybe not getting sent off when you do play for Dortmund.
Yeah, that'd be ideal.
That would also be good. Yeah. That was not a smart quote from Emre Mor.
I'm going to say we're one of the few podcasts based in the United States to ever say the phrase, "That's so Emre Mor." Like, not a lot of people are that familiar with him.
It's the new "That's so Raven."
Sure. That is so the behavior that I've typically come to expect from Raven. Yes.
All right,
thanks, Zach Galifianakis, for that one.
Thank you to Wes, to Keith, to Jim, to Russell, to Danielle, to Mason, to Gillian, and to Scott D for the scouting reports today. If you would like to join the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network, you go to totalsoccershow.com/subscribe. You will be supporting the show, helping us continue to make episodes of the Total Soccer Show. If you are waiting for your scout, first of all, I apologise. I meant to do some scouting admin the other day and I didn't get to it. But send an email with the subject line, Itchy Feet. Let us know the type of player you are looking for. I will get you a scout assigned as soon as possible. All right, Taylor Rockwell, that brings us to the end of today's episode.
It sure does, buddy.
On tomorrow's episode, I'll be talking to Stephanie Yang from Stars and Stripes FC, 2/3 educated guesses, but also some really good knowledge at Stars and Stripes FC. We'll be talking about the new US Women's National Team, CBA, which has been agreed, right, just before recording, basically this morning.
Yep.
It was announced. So all is good now, mostly. US Women's National Team and US Soccer have shaken hands. CBA is agreed. Until then, Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, pal.
Listeners, threw a pal in there.
I already said buddy earlier.
I'm not your pal, buddy.
Much your buddy guy.
Listeners, thank you for listening. We always appreciate it. We know other podcasts are available, so we love it when you listen to our show. We will talk to you again tomorrow.
You gotta slice it.